my favorite songs. Oh, whoa. Sorry, the computer was on. These are my favorite songs. I love this music. I pray with this music. I rise higher with this music. I hate turning this music off. Good Shabbos, my holy sisters and brothers. It's great to be with you. That was Eitan Katz doing his Lecha Dodi that we sing on Friday nights, welcoming Shabbos. And that particular tune is a Breslov tune, right? From the Breslover Hasidim, the followers of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us on a Friday afternoon? So excited that Shabbos is coming. Steve in New Hampshire, Shandor in the Bronx, Bill in mid-Missouri, Yehudit saying Shabbat Shalom. Just got back from Budapest at 1 a.m. Wow, and you're awake and learning. Well done. I hope that was a great visit. I've never been to Hungary and I really need to go. My mother, my grandmother, my mother's whole side of the family, Hungarian. But, they had mixed feelings about Hungary after the Holocaust, as you can imagine. Paula in Chicago, and I need to reload and refresh. Where am I? Paula in Chicago. Gotta roll back. Paula in Chicago. I gotta go backwards. Right. Paula in Chicago. James in Indianapolis. Vitalis Ong Ong in Nairobi. Wonderful to have you with us from across the sea, Vitalis. Elise in Niagara, John in Scotland, also across the pond. Welcome, welcome. Karen in Northern California, Gordo in Scotland. You guys have a minion in Scotland. We should all get together. Tom in Pennsylvania, Guy in Ohio, Melissa in Great Neck, Debbie in New Jersey, Bella in Florida, Randy in Florida, Sarah is with us, Carol says good Shabbos, Lindsay in Cincinnati, Rebecca is with us, Ed in Illinois, Lucy in Minnesota, Rebecca's in Florida, Carolyn in Raleigh. Welcome, everybody. It's really great to have you with us on a Friday. Lynn in North Texas, Yitzhak in Kansas City. I just got such a nice note. I know there's a few lawyers here in our group, so you may have heard of David Nimmer, who wrote Nimmer on Contracts. So I met David a few years ago through Wanda Peretz, our artist in residence, who had a copyright issue. I'm sorry, it's Nimmer on Copyrights. I think it's Nimmer on Copyrights. And Wanda had a copyright issue. I ended up sort of helping her out with that and meeting David Nimmer. And he got an Accidental Talmudist t-shirt. And he just sent me a note from Israel where he's been traveling around with his family. And he says, Sal, I got to tell you, this Accidental Talmudist shirt is a conversation starter everywhere I go in Israel. People constantly coming up to me. They watch the show or they read the posts or they're not familiar with it, which actually the smaller group, but they're just curious. What is an Accidental Talmudist? Who is an Accidental Talmudist? And of course, the answer is, I may have been the first Accidental Talmudist, but everyone who stumbles into our community and begins learning, takes it as a sign to begin learning and grow in wisdom, you are an Accidental Talmudist too. So highly recommend the t-shirts, and they're available at shop.accidentaltalmudist.org. And the proceeds all go to our nonprofit and help us share more Torah with more people around the world. All right. We are doing, we're doing a double daf today, but we've already done half of page 108. So we're just doing the second half of 108 and 109, and then we'll be back on schedule since I had a Maccabeah Games commitment yesterday. Okay. We picked this up at the bottom of 108a. We are in chapter 13 and now discussing, opening today with Mishnah number 3 here in chapter 13. We're in tractate 14 of the Talmud. Generally, these are the laws of levirate marriage. We've had a lot of related questions about marriage that come up and then touch on yibum, levirate marriage. And here in this chapter, we're talking about a minor girl's right of refusal if her family marries her off to an adult man and then she doesn't want to be in that marriage, she doesn't even need a divorce. She can just declare her refusal, walk away, and it's as if she never was married. The marriage is annulled, and unlike in the case of a divorce, where a divorcee would be disqualified from marrying a Cohen, a priest, she is a girl who, as an adult, never was married and she remains qualified to marry a Cohen, to marry a priest. Okay, Mishnah number 3. If a minor girl refuses a man, he is permitted to marry her close relatives, right? A man cannot marry a woman and her sister. Even if he divorces his wife, as long as his wife is alive, he can never marry her sister. But if he's married to this minor girl and she refuses the marriage, then it's as if that marriage never was, and so he and her sister remain permitted to each other if they should decide to marry. So if a minor girl refuses a man, he is permitted to marry her close relatives, like her mother or her sister. And she is permitted to marry his close relatives, like his father or his brother. And he has not disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood, as she is not considered divorced. However, if he gave her a bill of divorce, then even though the marriage was valid only according to rabbinic law and not Torah law, right? By rabbinic law, they created this marriage to minors because people were doing it anyway, and they needed a legal framework for it. But according to Torah law, only adults can marry each other. However, if he gave her a bill of divorce, then even though the marriage with the minor was valid only according to rabbinic law and not Torah law, he is prohibited from marrying her close relatives, and she is prohibited from marrying his close relatives, and he has disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. Right? She can refuse him, and it's as if the marriage never was. But if he's the one that chooses to end the marriage, he doesn't do that with refusal. Only the minor girl can do a refusal. If he wants to end the marriage, he gives her a bill of divorce. At that point, they are a divorced couple. They were married and now divorced. So now the laws of divorce would apply, even though she's a minor. If he gave her a bill of divorce, but afterward he remarried her, can a Jewish husband and wife who divorce get remarried? Yes and no. If a woman gets divorced from a man and then she goes and marries some other guy, divorces him or is widowed from him, and then she would like to come back and the original marriage, they would like to remarry the original couple, that's prohibited. But if the original couple divorces and before she goes off and marries some other guy or even sleeps with some other guy, she comes back to her husband and they decide to remarry, then it is permitted. So here in this case with the minor, the wife who's a minor, if he gave her a bill of divorce but afterward remarried her and she subsequently refused him because she's a minor and she married another man and then she was widowed or divorced from the second husband, so she is permitted to return to the first husband. Why? Because that first marriage is like it never existed. It's not that she was married, divorced to a second guy and then came back. Since the first marriage was ended by a refusal, it's as if it never existed. So it's really only the second marriage for her if she goes, marries another guy, divorces him, and then comes back to the first guy, but she was never married to him because the refusal annulled the marriage. Since she left him the last time by means of refusal, the refusal cancels the bill of divorce. So that's interesting. Since she left him the last time by means of refusal, the refusal cancels the bill of divorce that he gave her previously, and her status is that of a minor girl who refused her husband and who was not forbidden to her first husband after a second marriage. Now, what's interesting about that is you would think that after the first husband gave her a bill of divorce, that it would be too late for her to refuse him and end the marriage, to come out of it as one who was part of an annulled marriage rather than as a divorcee, right? But here's how it worked. If he gave her a bill of divorce, but then remarried her, and she subsequently refused him, right? So the fact that they were married, divorced, remarried, and then she refused him will actually cancel the divorce with which she came out of being married to him the first time, even though they had a second marriage. Now, this is only because the whole time she was a minor, right? Married, divorced, married again. Then she refuses him. The fact that she refuses him is because she's still a minor, and that refusal now annuls everything that came before, including that first marriage and divorce. So since she left him the second time, the same guy, by means of refusal, the refusal cancels the bill of divorce that he gave her previously, and her status is that of a minor girl who refused her husband and who is not forbidden to her first husband after a second marriage. However, if the order was different, and if she refused him and then subsequently married again, they remarried, and this time he gave her a bill of divorce, and she married another man, and she was widowed or divorced from the other guy, then she's forbidden to return to the first husband. Why? Because they were married, and then she refused, and then they married again, and then they divorced. So the final outcome of that first couple was a divorce. And that's why she can't return to that guy if she then goes and marries some other man and then comes back. You can't come back after divorce. You can come back after refusal. This is the principle concerning a minor girl and now we're on 108b. This is the principle concerning a minor girl who refused her husband and then married several times. If the bill of divorce followed the refusal and she remarried, she is forbidden to return to him. But if the refusal came after the bill of divorce, then she is permitted to return to him because the ultimate outcome was refusal and what came before was annulment. Since the refusal followed the bill of divorce, it is clear that she was a minor and neither the marriage nor the divorce were ever valid by Torah law. However, when the ultimate separation is by means of a bill of divorce, even though she might technically be a minor, as far as the public is concerned, she emerged from that marriage as a divorcee. And so they're not so sure whether she was a minor or not. No one is sure exactly how old she was. They're not looking up her birth certificate. But what they know is that she's a divorcee, and that sounds like maybe she was an adult at the time of the final separation from the husband, and that's why it was divorce. Remember, refusal only works as long as you're a minor. So she was married, remarried, in, out, but at the end, it ends with a refusal. Okay, so she must have been a minor the whole time, and all of that marriage and divorce can be annulled. But if at the end of the process she's a divorcee, then we're going to treat her like a divorcee, even if she was technically a minor. If a minor girl refuses one man and marries another, and he divorces her, and then she marries another man and refuses him, and then she marries another man and he divorces her, this is the principle for this case. With regard to anyone that she leaves by means of a bill of divorce, it is prohibited for her to return to him. And with regard to anyone she leaves by means of a refusal, she is permitted to return to him, which sounds, makes sense after what we read in the first clause of the Mishnah. That's the Mishnah. Now we're on the Gemara here for this Mishnah number 3. It was taught in the Mishnah that if the man gave his minor wife a bill of divorce, but subsequently remarried her, and she refused him, and then she married someone else, she is permitted to remarry the first husband when her marriage to the second is concluded, through whether by widowhood or divorce. So apparently, refusal comes and nullifies a bill of divorce. And that's what we learn, right? So if she was married and divorced, but then she remarried the same guy, and then she's still a minor and refused him, then everything that came before both marriages, the divorce in the middle, all of that is nullified because she still has a right to refuse this man, and it's as if they were never married at all. And so correct, the declaration of refusal nullifies the bill of divorce. So the Gemara raises a contradiction from the end of the Mishnah. But if a minor girl refuses one man and marries another, and he divorces her, and then she marries a different man and refuses him, and then she marries another man and he divorces her, well, this is the principle. With regard to anyone she leaves by means of a bill of divorce, she is prohibited from returning to him. Now, with regard to anyone she leaves by means of a refusal, she is permitted to return to him. So apparently, A refusal of another man does not come and nullify one's own bill of divorce. If the refusal completely nullified the marriage to the second husband, there would be no obstacle to remarrying her first husband, as an ex-wife who did not marry another man is permitted to remarry her first husband. However, the divorce, combined with the second marriage, does generate a prohibition, and she is prohibited from remarrying in this case. So there it seems like the refusal does not nullify the bill of divorce, right? In one case, she's married to a guy, they divorce, they remarry, then she refuses him. That's as if it never was. She goes and marries a second guy, they divorce, she can come back to the first guy, even though she was married to someone else, because vis-a-vis the first guy, nothing ever happened. The refusal nullified everything that came before. But if she's married and divorced, and then she goes marries a second guy and refuses him, right? Now, refusal nullifies what comes before it. So vis-a-vis the second husband, when she married him and then refused, it's as if they were never married. Therefore, you would think she could return to the first husband, even though they were married and divorced, and she went and married a second guy. The fact that she refused the second guy and nullified their marriage ought to indicate that she can return to the first husband and remarry him, even though they married and divorced. And you cannot marry a woman after divorcing her if she's been married to some other man in between. But if the refusal nullifies the marriage, why would we say she's prohibited to return to the first man? And the reason is, it's not that she's considered like she married someone else in between, and now we're gonna, change the precedent that refusal doesn't nullify marriage. Refusal does nullify a marriage as long as she's still a minor. The reason she's not going to be allowed to return to the first husband, whom she divorced, is a policy matter, and it's because of behavior that the sages wanted to avoid in the population, as we shall see. So Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, the MIshna is disjointed, and he who taught this law that she may remarry her first husband if she refused him after he divorced her, did not teach the law in the second part of the MIshna that her refusal of another man does not render her permitted to her divorced husband. There does seem to be a contradiction. So the first answer is, the reason there's a contradiction is because a different rabbi is teaching the first half of the MIshna from the rabbi who's teaching the second half of the MIshna. Rava said, no. What is the difficulty here? Perhaps her refusal of him nullifies his bill of divorce, while her refusal of the other man does not nullify the original husband's bill of divorce. And the Gemara asks, in what way is her refusal of the other man different that it does not nullify his bill of divorce? Isn't it that because she is familiar with the intimations and gestures, keritzotav, of her first husband, that he will lead her astray and bring her back to him, causing her to refuse her new husband and then return to him? That's what's going on. This is why the sages prohibited this pattern. She's a minor, all right? So first of all, we have to, understand this in an ancient world context and not today, right? Today, we cannot get our minds around the idea that an adult man would be married to a girl who's less than 12 years old. It's disgusting, it's rape. There's nothing to be said about it. Ancient world, different customs, different mores, much shorter lifespan. And this was actually a way to protect girls from being left fatherless, is where this stuff comes up. So just understand it in the ancient context. So what happens here is her family married her off to this man. And then let's say he decided he didn't like her. And so he divorced her. Or she refused him. But in this case, he divorced her. And then she goes and marries another man. Now, she's still a minor. And then the first guy says, you know what, I was wrong. I should have kept her. I should have held on to her. I shouldn't have divorced her. Now, she's still a young girl and, subject to the manipulation of a predator, of an adult, right? So he could go to her now. He's used to her. He knows how to talk to her. and with these winks and gestures. This word, it's a very interesting word, keritzot. It means winking and gestures, right? It's these like little actions that can seduce a person or can get to manipulate them into doing what you want. So he sort of knows how to sweet talk her in a way because he was married to her. And because all she has to do to leave the second marriage is refuse. She's still a minor. So this first husband can go to her and say, no, just tell him you don't want him. Just say you don't want him. That's all you have to do. And you can walk away. You can come back to my house, right? Since we don't want that first husband who divorced her, or even if she refused him, we don't want that guy influencing her in her second marriage. That's why the sages said that even though a refusal in the second marriage should make it as if she was never married to the second guy and therefore eligible to return to the first husband even after a divorce, the sages said, no, we're not going to allow that, right? So consequently, it was decreed that she may not return to her first husband by refusing the second because she could be manipulated that way. But for the same reason, the refusal against the first husband himself also should not nullify his own bill of divorce, as since she is familiar with his intimations and gestures, he will lead her astray and bring her back to him after she was married to another man. Right, so in the first case of the MIshna, where they were married, a minor girl married to the man, he divorced her, they remarried, and then she refused him, and we've said that nullifies the bill of divorce. It's as if nothing ever happened. It wasn't just a marriage and a refusal. It was a marriage, divorce, marriage, refusal, all with the same guy. But if we're going to be afraid, if we're going to, sort of decree against the possibility that such a man might manipulate the young girl, so why wouldn't we be concerned in that situation too? And why wouldn't we say, well, they were divorced, and then they remarried, and then she refused him, okay, so she can walk away, that's fine. It's like the second marriage to the same man was as if it never happened. But when she then goes and marries some other guy, and let's say they divorce, she should not be able to come back to the first man because she was married and divorced, and she was a divorcee of his, but we don't decree like that. So the Gemara answers, but he already tried to lead her astray, and she was not led astray. In other words, he already remarried her after the divorce, and she still refused him, which proves that he does not have sufficient influence to lead her astray. But if there is a difficulty, it is the contradiction between one law involving another man and a different law involving another man that is difficult. And the MIshna states, if she refused him and he subsequently remarried her, and this time he gave her a bill of divorce, right? So if the order with the first husband, right? First we discussed that the minor girl married this man, he divorced her, they remarried, and she refused him. And that refusal makes it as if the first man never was in her life. There was no marriage. Even though it was marriage, divorce, marriage, refusal, the refusal cancels everything. But if they were married and she refused him, and then they married again, and then he divorced her, then that whole thing led to a divorce, and that's the final outcome of the first man in her, a divorce, right? So if she refused him, and he subsequently remarried her, and this time he gave her a bill of divorce, and then she married another man, and she was widowed or divorced to the second man, so she's prohibited from returning to her original husband because she's simply a divorcee of the first husband who was married to another man, and she can't return to the first husband. But if she had refused the second husband, then it's as if that marriage never was, and she would be permitted to return to the first husband. So apparently a refusal of the second man would have come and nullified his bill of divorce, permitting her to remarry the first husband despite her erstwhile marriage to the other man. And this raises a contradiction. As it is taught later, if a minor girl refuses one man and marries another, and he divorces her, and then she marries a third man and refuses him, so this is the principle. With regard to anyone that she leaves by means of a bill of divorce, she is prohibited from returning to him. With regard to anyone she leaves by means of a refusal, she is permitted to return to him. So apparently, the refusal of the other man cannot come and nullify his own bill of divorce. So Rabbi Elizer said, this Mishnah is disjointed, and he who taught this law did not teach that law. And Ula said the last clause in which it says a refusal does not nullify the bill of divorce is referring to a case where she was divorced 3 times. And since she was divorced 3 times, she appears to be an adult. And therefore, the sages did not allow her refusal to cancel the effect of the divorce. Now, the Gemara asks, according to Rabbi Elizer, who holds that the Mishnah is disjointed and it must have been taught by different rabbis, and that's why the one clause seems to contradict another clause of the Mishnah. So according to Rabbi Elizer, who says that the Mishnah is disjointed, who is the rabbi that taught that a minor may always remarry a husband that she refused, but she may not remarry one who divorced her? And Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, this can be determined based on the following incident. What is the meaning of that which is written? We have drunk our water for money, our wood comes to us for a price. Lamentations 5:4. Implying that Torah, which is analogous to water, Torah is often compared to water in a metaphoric sense, in the same way that a person will die without water, they'll die of thirst, and a person without Torah will die from a lack of Torah. Implying that Torah, which is analogous to water, can be purchased with money. What does that mean? So the Gemara explains. This refers to an incident. During the time of danger, meaning the religious persecution of the Jews by the Romans, this halachic ruling was requested. Right? There was an incident and people needed a ruling from a rabbi, from a sage. And the question was, if this girl, a minor, left her first husband by means of a bill of divorce, and then she married another man, and she left the second man by refusal, because she's still a minor, what is the law with regard to her returning to the first? Strictly speaking, according to the letter of the law and the principle, she should be allowed to return. So even though she was with a man after divorcing her first husband, the man she was with in the second marriage, since she refused that man, and that annuls the marriage, it's as if she never was with him, so she should be permitted to return to the first husband. But we see that the sages decreed against it because that first husband might manipulate her, and we want him out of the picture. So when they asked this question during the Roman persecution, what happened? Those involved, the people who had this question and needed an answer, they hired one person for 400 dinars, an extraordinary amount of money, for the dangerous mission to go and get the answer to this question. Getting a question from a rabbi on a complex issue of law doesn't seem like a dangerous affair, or a dangerous mission, but it was during the Roman persecution when the rabbis were not allowed to learn or teach Torah publicly. All right? So they hired a person for 400 dinars and sent him on a dangerous mission to go see Rabbi Akiva. How dangerous was it? Rabbi Akiva had already been thrown into a Roman prison for teaching Torah publicly. To get the answer, they needed to send their agent into the Roman prison to somehow get an audience with Rabbi Akiva, ask him the question, learn the answer, and bring it back to them. So they sent him in to where he was incarcerated in a Roman prison for teaching Torah. And the agent reached Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva ruled that it is forbidden for this girl who was a minor girl, married, divorced, married a second man, refused him. It is prohibited for her to go back to the first man and marry him. They asked Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera in Netzivin in Babylonia, and he also deemed it forbidden. Now, it's not explained here, why would they ask the same question of two sages? You're actually not allowed to go answer shopping among rabbis. It's still a principle today. If you have a rabbi in your life and you have a halakhic question, you ask your rabbi. You can't go sort of shopping for a rabbi that will give you the answer that you want. But in any case, they asked two rabbis, and luckily they agreed. So it was the same answer, prohibited. So Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosef, said, this question was not what they asked, as it was unnecessary. If you rendered permitted a prohibition for whose violation one is liable to receive excision from the world to come, meaning charis, death at the hands of the heavenly court, i.e., if the prohibition against sexual intercourse with a married woman is dissolved by the refusal, right? This girl who is married to a man, she is prohibited to every other man in the world until she gets divorced or widowed. But the declaration of refusal can also undo marriage and render her permitted to other men, which is it's very powerful, that declaration of refusal. It's able to do that. So if the prohibition against sexual intercourse with a married woman, meaning marriage, is dissolved by the refusal, as the marriage is nullified retroactively, then it is not clear, all the more so, that after a refusal, the regular prohibition against remarrying one's ex-wife after she was married to another should be permitted, right? Since refusal is so strong that it undoes a marriage and makes her permitted to every other man in the world that she's now free to marry, why does it still leave some kind of a trace of marriage that would keep her prohibited to going back to the first husband that she married and divorced? That's the original contradiction that we had. And we saw it's not because it leaves a trace of marriage, rather it's a policy matter that they didn't want the first husband influencing her. Now, the opinion in the Mishnah that refusal does not cancel the effect of divorce is in accordance with that of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, while the opinion that she is permitted to return to her first husband after refusing the second one is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosef, continued, rather, this is what the question that they sent to Rabbi Akiva. If the minor was the wife of someone's mother's brother, meaning a secondary forbidden relative, a relative forbidden to him by rabbinic law, and afterward his paternal brother married her and died, so that she became eligible to him for yibum, for levirate marriage. Now we see why this is in this tractate. What is the law with regard to the following? May she refuse now and uproot her first marriage to the mother's brother so that she will no longer be a forbidden relative. And likewise, if she has a co-wife, the co-wife will not be the co-wife of a forbidden relative, so that that co-wife may enter into yibum. In other words, in a case where there is a mitzvah, a commandment of yibum, of levirate marriage, is refusal after the husband's death valid or not? Can she issue a refusal after her husband's death? And we talked about this before. She would do that to the Yavam, to the surviving brother, or actually she would, in a case where there's a separate prohibited relationship because she's related to his brother in some way, like a maternal uncle, so that's like a secondary relative, and so she would be prohibited, and so would her co-wife. But if she could issue a refusal after her husband died to annul that marriage retroactively, then she would be free, or certainly her co-wife would be free, to marry the Yavam in Yibum after this husband dies. So can she issue this refusal? Can this minor girl, who's one of the two wives, after her husband dies, can she do the refusal then? So that was the question they sent to Rabbi Akiva. Now those involved hired two people. In the first version of the story, they hired one. Now they hired two people for 400 dinars, and they sent them out, the two agents, one to Rabbi Akiva and one to Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. Now that makes sense because it was a dangerous mission, and who knows if they're going to get an answer from either one. Maybe the agent will be killed for trying to learn some Torah from Rabbi Akiva in prison, or from going all the distance to Netzivin to consult with Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. So they want to know if it's prohibited. So Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashan said that Rav concedes that she is permitted to the brother of the man to whom she is forbidden. Rav Yitzchak is referring to a case of a minor who refused her husband, remarried the same man, and she was subsequently divorced, and then she married another man and she refused him. Although she may not remarry the first husband, she may marry his brother, despite the fact that one may not ordinarily marry the divorcee of one's brother. So the Gemara asks, that's obvious. It is he, her former husband, whose hints and gestures, who can manipulate her through hints and gestures, but not those of his brother. He was never married to her before, so that there is no concern that the brother will persuade her to refuse her next husband. So the Gemara explains, Rav Yitzchak bar Ashan saw fit to point this out, lest you say, issue a decree rendering it prohibited for her to marry this brother due to the risk that such a marriage would lead people to think she is permitted and to marry that brother, her original husband. Therefore, he teaches us that no such decree was instituted. And there are those who say a different version of the discussion, that Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashan said, just as she is forbidden to him, to the man who divorced her, so she is forbidden to his brothers. The Gemara asks, but she is not familiar with their intimations and gestures. They can't manipulate her. Why is it prohibited for her to marry them? And the Gemara answers, it is a rabbinic decree concerning the ex-husband's brothers due to him, the ex-husband. If she were to be permitted to her ex-husband's brothers, people might mistakenly think that she is even permitted to remarry this ex-husband himself. And so the bottom line is, she was married and divorced as a minor. She went and married a second guy and then refused him. She ought to be able to come back to the first guy just in terms of the law of divorce. But because she's a minor who was married to this man who knew her well and could easily manipulate her, the sages decreed no, she may not return to that first husband. And that concludes the Gemara on Mishnah number 3. Here's Mishnah number 4, and that's going to carry us into page 109. With regard to one who divorces a woman and remarries her and then dies childless, his wife is permitted to enter into Yibum, into levirate marriage with her Yavam. But Rabbi Elizer prohibits this. Likewise, with regard to one who divorces an orphan minor girl whose mother and brothers married her off and remarries her and subsequently dies, she is permitted to the Yavam in Yibum, right? The brother-in-law in levirate marriage. And Rabbi Elizer prohibits it. A minor girl whose father married her off, in which case the marriage is valid by Torah law, and who was subsequently divorced while she was still a minor, is like an orphan during the lifetime of her father. Her father has more rights to marry off this minor girl than her mother or her brothers, right? That's why we've been talking about the case of the family marries her off, the mother or brothers marry her off. That's by Torah law. A father can marry off his daughter he has greater power to do that. However, a minor girl whose father married her off, in which case the marriage is valid by Torah law, even though she's a minor, and who was subsequently divorced while she was still a minor, now she's like an orphan during the lifetime of her father. Why? Because he no longer has the right to marry her off. And she cannot become fully married because she is a minor. She won't be able to have a Torah law marriage until she becomes an adult. A father can marry off his daughter while she's still a minor, and she won't have that right of refusal, but any other member of her family doesn't have that. And if the husband remarries her while she is still a minor and then dies childless, everyone agrees that she is forbidden to the Yavam, to the brother-in-law, and she may not enter into Yibum. That's Mishnah number 4, the Gemara. The sage Ephah said, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Elizer, who prohibits a man from entering into Yibum with a woman whom his brother had divorced and remarried? Right? So a man married a woman, divorced her, remarried her. Now, we're not talking about a minor girl, just adult woman. There was a couple, they were married. They got divorced. She didn't go marry someone else. They said, you know what, we shouldn't be divorced. Let's get back together. They remarried. That's legal because she wasn't with another man in the meantime. Then he dies, and they never had a child together. He leaves a brother. Can the brother marry this woman? You'd think, why not? Yibum should absolutely be permitted here, right? She was married to this guy. He never had a child. At the time of death, they were married, and he had never had a child. So the brother can step in and perform Yibum with the widow. Rabbi Elizer says no. Why? Because there was a time when they were divorced. And when they were divorced, there's no Yibum. If a couple, is married and they don't have a child, and then they divorce, and then he dies, he might leave a brother, but the brother doesn't come in and perform Yibum with that woman because she is not his widow. She is his divorcee. But since they remarried, she is the widow. But according to Rabbi Elizer, the fact that they had a period where she would have been prohibited to the brother because she was a divorcee, not a widow, that is enough to render her prohibited. And so Rabbi Elizer would say they have to perform chalitza. But the sages said to Ephah, well, wait a minute. If she's not eligible to perform Yibum because there was a period that they were divorced while the man was alive before they remarried, and that's enough to say we're taking Yibum off the table, well, why is Chalitza on the table? There should be nothing. The fact that they were once divorced and then he died and he still hadn't had a child, even though they remarried, since Yibum is off the table, then according to the opinion of Rabbi Elizer, Chalitza should also be off the table. And if you would say, indeed, Rabbi Elizer also exempts her from Chalitza, but isn't it taught in a Baraisa? It was said in the name of Rabbi Elizer that she does perform Chalitza. So rather, Ephah said, I do not know the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Elizer. So Abaye came and explained it. Abaye said, this is the reasoning of Rabbi Elizer. He is uncertain whether the death of the husband is that is the moment when we measure whether Yibum applies. Does it happen at the death of the husband and this determines that she is a candidate for Yibum? Or is it the original marriage that determines that she's a candidate for Yibum? In other words, Rabbi Elizer was uncertain as to whether the obligation to perform levirate marriage, Yibum, is established only at the death of one's brother or already from the beginning of the brother's marriage. If death determines that she is a candidate for levirate marriage, and that is what the majority rules, then she has happened before him for Yibum, as she is the wife of his childless brother who died. So that is the law. But since Rabbi Elizer was unsure and he thought, well, maybe the original marriage determines that she is a candidate for levirate marriage, and then they divorced, so she was forbidden to him for a time as his brother's ex-wife, and therefore she became exempt from Yibum forever. So according to Rabbi Elizer, it is due to this uncertainty that the brother may not enter into Yibum, but he must perform Chalitza in case we don't determine it that way. It's not that Rabbi Elizer was saying, well, no, we don't measure at the time of death. We measure by the fact that they were married at one time and then divorced. Rabbi Elizer was saying, I'm not sure how important that is. So that's why Rabbi Elazar's ruling was, because of that uncertainty, they cannot perform Yibum, but because of that uncertainty, they must perform Chalitza. So Rava said, actually, it is obvious to Rabbi Elizer that death determines that she is a candidate for Yibum. However, everyone is well informed with regard to divorces. Everyone knows that the woman was divorced, but maybe not everyone knows that she was remarried. And they do not necessarily know that she remarried him. Therefore, there is concern that people will mistakenly think that one entered into Yibum with his brother's ex-wife. Everyone heard they were divorced. Maybe they only remarried recently and then he died before the news got out that they remarried. So people were like, well, wait a minute, that was his ex-wife. Why is she now marrying his brother? Oh, I guess I misunderstood the law. I guess you can marry your brother's ex-wife. No, you cannot. No, you cannot. Yibum only counts if she's the widow, and she was the widow at the time of his death. But because of that kind of appearance of impropriety, which might lead people to misinterpret the law, they decreed that she should perform Chalitza in that situation, at least according to the opinion of Rabbi Elizer, as explained by Rabbi. So the Gemara argues against this idea. On the contrary, her return to her former husband, since she is living with him, that generates publicity. People will know that they remarried. So the Gemara answers, are we not dealing even with a case of he remarried her in the evening and he died in the morning? In this instance, and others like it, not everyone would know that he remarried, and they will think that the brother took his deceased brother's ex-wife in Yibum, which is illegal, but people will misunderstand. And in order to avoid such situations, Rabbi Elizer decreed that she is always forbidden. Rabbi Ashi said, no. Rabbi Elizer had a different reason for requiring Chalitza and prohibiting Yibum when they were married, divorced, and remarried. Rather, says Rav Ashi, Rabbi Elizer was reasoning like this. He decreed to prohibit Yibum with these, i.e. women who were divorced and remarried, due to the case of a girl who is considered an orphan in the lifetime of her father. Right? That's the case where a father married off his minor daughter, and then the husband divorced her, so now she can't get married again. The father can't give her away again to be married. She's going to have to wait until she's an adult to get married. So because of that case is why Rabbi Elizer made this decree on all women who are married, divorced, and remarried that they can't perform Yibum. So Why? Because if a minor girl was married off by her father and then was divorced, so she is no longer subject to her father with regard to marriage and divorce. But because she is a minor, any marriage she enters into is by rabbinic rather than by Torah law. And so the Gemara comments, so too, this is reasonable based on what was taught in the latter clause of the Mishnah. A minor girl whose father married her off and was subsequently divorced while she was still a minor, she's like an orphan during her father's lifetime. And if the husband remarries her while she is still a minor and then he dies, everyone agrees that it is forbidden to the Yavam and may not enter into Yibum with her. Right? So since the girl who was a minor, who married, divorced, remarried, and then the husband dies, everyone agrees she's prohibited to the brother-in-law. So Rabbi Elizer said, okay, well then any woman, minor or adult, who marries, divorces, marries, and then her husband dies, she's prohibited in Yibum. So what is the purpose of stating this law? It's obvious. But rather, is it not teaching us Rabbi Elazar's reason for decreeing that these women who were divorced and remarried are forbidden due to that woman, the girl who is considered like an orphan in the lifetime of the father? And the Gemara concludes, yes, that was Rabbi Elazar's reason. And the Gemara comments, it is taught in a Baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rav Ashi. The rabbis concede to Rabbi Elizer concerning a minor girl whose father married her off and who was divorced, that she is like an orphan in the lifetime of the father, and that if her husband remarried her, she is forbidden to the Yavam, because her divorce was a full-fledged divorce by Torah law. Why was it a full-fledged divorce by Torah law? Because even though she was a minor, her marriage was a full-fledged marriage by Torah law because it was her father who married her off to this man. Presumably the father can do that because the father loves his daughter and would only do what is good for the daughter. Because her divorce was a full-fledged divorce by Torah law, while her remarriage was not a full-fledged remarriage as she was still a minor. Right? See, after this minor girl is married and divorced, if she marries again, that's not her father giving her away. Now it's like as if her mother and brothers did it, and that's only a marriage by rabbinic law, not by Torah law. And this implies that Rabbi Elazar's ruling is prompted by the case of a girl who's like an orphan in her father's lifetime, and this was the reason for his decree, which we just learned a moment ago. Now the Baraisa continues, in what case is this statement said? In a case where he divorced her while she was a minor, and he remarried her while she was still a minor. But if he divorced her while she was a minor and remarried her when she was already an adult, or if he remarried her while she was a minor, but she matured into legal adulthood while she was married to him, and then he died, so now she may perform either chalitza or yibum, because at that point, she is the full-fledged adult wife who becomes the widow of this man who died childless, and so she can marry his brother through yibum. It was said in the name of Rabbi Elizer, she must perform chalitza and may not enter into yibum, since he decreed that all remarried women may not enter into yibum due to the case of one who is like an orphan in her father's lifetime. But that's the law according to Rabbi Elizer. Everyone else holds different. Rava asked Rav Nachman, what is the law with regard to the rival wife of a girl whose husband remarried her? According to Rabbi Elizer, is the girl regarded as a forbidden relative to the extent that even her rival wife may not enter into Yibum? And he said to him, she herself is forbidden due to a rabbinic decree, as we explained. And will we then proceed to issue a decree to prevent violation of a decree? The rabbis don't issue decrees to protect us from violating rabbinic decrees. They only issue rabbinic decrees to protect people from violating Torah laws. So we don't issue a decree upon a decree, and therefore the rival wife can perform Yibum. And the Gemara challenges, isn't it taught in a Baraisa? It was said, in the name of Rabbi Elizer, both she and her rival wife must perform chalitza. And the Gemara asks, would it enter your mind to say she and her rival wife? Why should two women from the same house perform chalitza? Chalitza performed by one of them exempts the other. Rather, should it not say, either she or her rival wife must perform chalitza, but even the rival wife may not enter into Yibum, according to Rabbi Elizer. And the Gemara responds, are you not amending the Mishnah? If so, amend it like this. She can only perform chalitza, but her rival wife may either perform chalitza or enter into Yibum. Time is getting short, so I'm just going to read Mishnah number 5. We just finished the Gemara Mishnah number 4, and I'm going to read Mishnah number 5, and then I'm going to take some comments and questions. Mishnah number 5. If two brothers are married to two sisters, and the sisters are minor girls, and the husband of one of them dies without having had a child, this widowed girl shall be exempt from Yibum due to her status as a forbidden relative, right? Because the man who had come before her for Yibum, her husband's brother, that man is married to her sister, right? And so he can't marry two sisters, therefore it's a prohibited relative, and that's why we take Yibum off the table. Now, the same law applies to two deaf-mute women whose status is like that of two minors in this matter, as their marriages are valid by rabbinic law only. And if two brothers were married to two sisters, one of them was an adult woman and the other was a minor woman, and the husband of the minor dies, the minor shall leave due to her status as the sister of a wife, as in the first case of the MIshna. But if the husband of the adult woman dies, it generates a Torah obligation of Yibum, which is not abrogated by the rabbinic prohibition proscribing the Yevama as his wife's sister. This prohibition is by rabbinic law, because marriage to a minor is rabbinic in origin. So what does one do under such circumstances? Rabbi Elizer says we instruct the minor, i.e. his wife, to refuse him so that her marriage is dissolved and he may then enter into levirate marriage with her adult sister, the widow of his childless brother. Rabban Gamliel says if the minor refuses of her own accord, her refusal is valid. But if not, she should wait until she reaches majority, whereupon her marriage is valid by Torah law, and that widowed adult sister shall be exempt from Yibum due to her status as the sister of a wife. Rabbi Yehoshua says when the brother married the adult sister, when the brother who is married to the adult sister, when he dies, leaving the brother married to the minor, woe to him for his wife, and woe to him for his brother's wife. Under these circumstances, he loses both women. He must release his own wife with a bill of divorce because he comes before her sister for Yibum, and he must release his brother's wife by performing chalitza because he was married to her sister. He cannot stay married to his wife because she's the sister of his Yevama, and he cannot enter into Yibum with the Yevama after divorcing his wife because the Yevama is his wife's sister. The principle that one is completely absolved from Yibum when the potential Yevama is a forbidden relative does not apply because Torah law does not recognize his marriage to the minor wife. It's only by rabbinic law to protect her, but is not a marriage recognized by Torah law. And that marriage's rabbinic sanction does not suffice to render the Yevama, his wife's sister, a forbidden relative who is not a candidate for levirate marriage. That's the MIshna. In the MIshna, I'm just going to read another paragraph because in the MIshna it said that in certain cases, right, the court pressures the girl to refuse her husband. And now people are going to say, well, wait a minute, that's not such a good idea. Now, the Gemara inquires about Rabbi Eliezer's suggestion to instruct the minor to refuse her husband. Is it permitted to instruct her to refuse? And that's why Rabbi Yehoshua said, no, we don't, not Rabbi Yehoshua, but who said it? Rabban Gamliel said, no. If she refuses on her own, okay, that refusal is valid, but we don't pressure her to refuse. The court shouldn't pressure her. So about that, Rabbi Elizer said we pressure her. Rabban Gamliel said we don't. And now the Gemara says, can we pressure a girl to refuse her husband? Is it permitted to instruct her to refuse? Doesn't Bar Kappara teach a person should always cling to three things and distance himself from three things? What should a person cling to? What are the three things he should cling to? He should cling to chalitza rather than yibum. Right? We've seen this before. Yibum, it's a mitzvah. It would seem to be good. But because if the widow and the brother-in-law are getting married because they're attracted to each other, then they're not doing it to build up the house of the brother who died. Their motivation is suspect, and it would be better if they perform chalitza than yibum. So a person should cling to three things: to chalitza over yibum, to bringing about peace, and to the nullification of vows. And a person should distance himself from three things. He should distance himself from refusal and from accepting deposits, as he is then responsible for them, and from serving as a guarantor. And the Gemara answers, well, a refusal for a mitzvah is different, as this refusal is performed to allow the mitzvah of yibum to be fulfilled with the other sister. right? We don't want to pressure girls to refuse their husbands, right? The mother and brothers love her too, and they probably married her to this guy for good reason. And, let her figure out for herself if she wants to remain married to him or not. But we shouldn't pressure her to refuse. And in fact, we should caution her that, girls, they can be moody and just decide, I don't want to be married to him and leave. We should say to her, hang in there a little longer. Maybe, he's just like the kind of guy you need to get to know him a little bit before you decide you don't want to be married to him. In other words, don't rush out of a marriage. Distance yourself from refusal. But in the things that people should cling to is perform chalitza over yibum, and incidental, and that's why it was the title of today's show, cling to peace, right? And then we just don't have time, but the Gemara will give a few proofs of how important it is to pursue peace. But we see that all over the Bible. We learn it in Psalms. We learn it in Proverbs. Seek peace and pursue it. Blessed are the peacemakers. That's actually not, I don't know if that's in the Bible. But definitely be like the disciples of Aaron who create peace, right? Aaron, Moses' brother, who was known, it's his legacy to this day. You want to be like Aaron, and you want to help people who are at war with each other, to find the compromise, find the way to establish peace. Great is peace, and anyone who helps people create peace will bring blessing into the world, bring blessing to the ones that are at war, bring blessing to himself and his family, etc. Cling to peace. Okay. Let us see if we have questions or comments. On pages 108 and 109. Celsa. And please forgive me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I'm not sure if it's Kelsa or Celsa, but I'm going to go with Celsa for now until you tell me different. Appearance of impropriety was a bit annoying to me until I had to wash my hands twice every time I used the bathroom. Once at the bathroom, and again when I was back into my classroom in front of my students, so they knew that I followed health guidelines and set a good example. And I thought, of course they'll know I did wash my hands, but then I felt it was not fair to just force them to believe me, so I washed my hands as often as necessary for health purposes and to set a good example. Very good. And we also have the principle in terms of appearance of impropriety and that these marriages might look as if they were sinful even though they were legally correct, that we want to distance ourselves from sin. I mean, that's the whole principle of rabbinic decrees, is to distance ourselves from sin. Charles. Shabbat Shalom. I missed the first part of the lecture. What is considered a refusal? A refusal is when a girl who is still a minor and her family married to a man, she has the right at any time to say no, right? Once an adult woman is married under Jewish law, under traditional Jewish law, only the husband can give her a divorce. Even in the Orthodox world now, people will write into the ketubah a provision. I don't know if it's universally accepted, but there is a provision that can be written into a marriage contract that the wife will have the right to seek divorce just like the husband has. But under traditional Jewish law, only the husband could give the divorce. But a minor girl actually has more rights than an adult woman because she's protected. And she can walk away from that marriage at any time, and she does that by making a declaration of refusal. Bill, perhaps they sent two messengers, one to each rabbi, reasoning that at least one of them might escape the Romans and return with the answer. Exactly. I think that's why they sent the two messengers, not forum shopping, trying to get the answer that they were looking for. I do believe that's what happened. Okay, my friends. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll proceed tomorrow night after Shabbos ends, the latest Shabbos ending of the year. So hopefully I can get on the air by about 9:30, 9:40 p.m. here in LA with page 110 here in Tractate Yevamos. And we're 12 pages from the end of the tractate, so maybe we'll start thinking about what l'chaim we'll make when we have our siyum on this tractate. Have a great rest of your Friday afternoon and a great Shabbos. Good Shabbos.